Nice.
Your DID test results show high risk. Alright, well, I guess it's time to pack it up and end my channel. All this time, I was focused on calling out other people for faking in a community of stigmatized individuals with an extremely rare disorder, but now that I took this quiz, I suddenly see my 700 alters coming to light, and now I know my true calling lies in making Meet the Alters TikToks in different wigs. But hey, it's not so bad, Girl Scouts. Maybe the real friends were the alters we made along the way, or whatever Ariana Gandhi said. Hey Girl Scout, what's shakin'? How have you been? I personally have been doing really well. I've been coping with my mental health really effectively lately, and I've even reached a place where I can give you a consistent upload schedule, which will be Fridays and Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for bearing with me amidst the chaos, and I appreciate you letting me grow alongside you on my own journey. Here on the channel, we love to talk about mental health. We focused on TikToks a lot the last few months, but I'd like to test out some new content on you guys. You liked some of the different stuff, like my fake disorder Sims videos, so hopefully I'm reading the room right with this one, but definitely let me know in the comments what you think. Today, I'd like to talk about self-diagnosis. TikTok kids seem to think self-diagnosis is really valid, that if they have a few symptoms of a disorder, then they definitely have it and can start saying they have it, and they should be telling others that they must have it as well. For example, there are many reasons that the pro-self-diagnosis community gives that at its core make a lot of sense. They mention how seeing professionals for a formal diagnosis is not always an accessible option, which is a valid point. Using assessments to know how to start understanding how to help manage debilitating symptoms is a really positive thing, and we're very fortunate to have so many free online guidelines to help us self-navigate on our journeys. However, social media is blurring the lines between what helps and where this is taken too far. Instead of clearly using self-diagnosis as a guideline to find coping mechanisms that will help manage perceived symptoms, these people end up going online and speaking on behalf of the community they self-diagnosed in, which is problematic because it isn't always accurate information. It's even more so problematic now that we see people using mental illness as an identity and an aesthetic, because people are now looking to self-diagnose not to help themselves, but to have something they can talk about to seem interesting and unique to gain popularity online. Let's compare these next two TikToks to explain.
I'm going to say this one more time for the people in the back in case you didn't hear me correctly. Self-diagnosis is okay if it's your only option. If you have the option to go to a professional, obviously going to a professional would be a better idea, because a professional not only has knowledge about the disorder that you think that you might have, they also have knowledge of a ton more disorders that cross over with symptoms of the disorder that you might think that you have. I went 2 years self-diagnosed, and whenever I went to a professional, I had diagnosed myself incorrectly, so I had been treating the disorder the wrong way. There are so many disorders out there. There are so many. You can't pinpoint exactly which one you have. Does that make sense? And even if you do, and you can, you probably still need to go to a professional to get the medication that you might need or the treatment that you might need. Anyway, have a good day.
This one makes really important points, talking about having a guideline for diagnosis, but also mentioning that it's easy to get wrong and that someone professional is the best option. But then you get things like the next TikToks with the same tags popping up alongside these helpful ones. As you can see, it's a very slippery slope into encouraging others to help themselves with what tools they have to work with, to suddenly spreading a lot of misinformation because of oversimplifying symptoms and trying to hop on trends. With the virality of TikTok and the onslaught of people going viral by sharing something like signs you have this disorder, people want to hop on what's popular and fit in by being on trend. And if you get really general, you encourage more people to engage, which unfortunately ends in spreading a lot of vague, misconstrued information. All of these can be symptoms of the disorder, yes, but they can also be symptoms of a lot of other things. The intricacies of narrowing down a diagnosis and eliminating other options can be very complicated. This is why professionals train and study for years and specialize even further in postgraduate studies, so that they can figure out what's the root cause of the things you're feeling. And hey, counterintuitively, going in thinking you have it figured out can delay getting the right resources as well. Because of how hard it was to compensate for neurodivergency as I took on more adult responsibility, at first glance it just appeared that I had become even more obsessive and emotional. I went in confident I knew it was wrong based off of these general symptoms and skipped key details, not thinking they were relevant. I took my OCD and my BPD diagnosis and attacked them with tons of help resources, and felt devastated that they weren't working. And yeah, that's because I was misdiagnosed. If a professional hadn't asked me some very specific questions that clearly showcased how I had grown up learning to compensate with my struggles and uncovered the leading causes for certain intrusive thoughts and symptoms I had, I don't think I ever would have figured it out on my own. Ironically enough, because of the noise in my brain from having ADHD. With all of this being said, I wanted to show you just how easy it is to trick yourself into thinking you have a disorder by taking these self-assessment quizzes and breaking down some of my answers so you can see just how general these things are, and how these should only be guidelines on where to start navigating with a professional or with coping resources. You'll be surprised at just how insane my results end up. So let's just jump right into that. To begin, I thought we could take a baseline quiz of ADHD. I'm formally diagnosed and can explain my thought process answering this quiz before knowing about my diagnosis. Let's begin. Question 1. I find it difficult finishing a task or project. Now, because I experience periods of hyperfocus, I can go between neglecting everything to finish one specific thing to finding it hard to finish something because too much is in my head. Since it feels about 50-50 to me, I would probably go for the median answer and say sometimes. And same thing for question 2, I find it difficult to organize myself for a task because again, it depends if I'm hyper-focused or not. Question 3, I find it difficult to remember appointments. Well, because I've dealt with undiagnosed ADHD my whole life, I've figured out ways to compensate as much as possible to not let it affect things that I value, like respecting others' time. I do this by writing down reminders and appointments, setting timers, and have others tell me about my upcoming engagements. Because I've done this for so long, I would probably look at this question and say never, because I'm not thinking of the hard work I put in because I forget. I'd be thinking of the fact that I don't miss appointments at all. Question 4 kind of goes along the same lines as questions 1 and 3, so I said sometimes. I answered question 5 about fidgeting and said often because that's true, and landed on question 6. I would describe myself as being on the go and feel compelled to do things as if driven by a motor. I once again had to mediate with sometimes because while I feel compelled to do things, I'm often so exhausted and shut down as a means to cope with my brain being entirely overloaded. Questions 7 and 8 were both sometimes, since the answer depended on if I was hyper-focused or not. Then we get to question 9, I make decisions quickly and fail to think through the consequences. This is another thing I used to get in trouble with. So I figured out compensation by being overly worried about consequences of most things. And since my impulsiveness lies in making smaller purchases, it's never really caused any major issues, and so I would never have really considered it. For those reasons, I would pick rarely. As you can see, the results show unlikely to be suffering with ADHD. I obviously have it, and treatment is working splendidly, but it's those nuances and small details that really give it away. This quiz isn't specific enough to specify why I'm saying what I'm saying, and the why is the biggest indicator. If I was looking for answers, the right one would have completely passed my gaze. But hey, lucky for me, I'm totally valid and there are so many cool disorders to choose from. All I need to do is take the right quiz and I'll be blessed with a label to know which side of TikTok I can start posting on and what stereotypical traits I can mention in conversation to seem relevant and cool. Will it be autism? Find out now. Question 1. I prefer to do things on my own rather than with others. Well, things is very general. I like to go out with others, but I prefer working alone on school or work stuff. And gaming is kind of 50-50. I guess with that logic, I'll have to say slightly agree. Moving on to question 2, I prefer doing things the same way. For instance, my morning routine or trip to the supermarket. Like I said earlier, I forget things all the time, and so sticking to a strict schedule is one of the ways I manage that. I was always told that I was rigid and stubborn, but I didn't realize I was doing these things because I knew I would forget otherwise. But of course, that wasn't the question, so we gotta answer definitely agree. Next question about becoming strongly obsessed with something is a definite agree because of hyperfocus, and the question about being sensitive to noise is also a definitely agree. Of course, that's from not being able to focus combined with having a very sensitive vagus nerve. I know, sexy. But I can't explain all my woes, so I just have to go with what fits best. I answered the rest of the questions, all based on things like considering when I'm interested in a topic or not, my focus levels, my compensating tactics such as being rigid with routine, and mediating to the middle answers when I can be two extremes and can't really pick a solid answer. Of course, there's some stuff that's going to overlap with ADHD, and in those cases I have a very clear answer. Like with question 29, I have some very strong interests and get upset if I can't pursue them. And what do you know? I'm autistic. Wow. Now I'm going to go online and tell everyone about my experience living with it. Catch me on TikTok telling everyone who gets annoyed when they can't think in a loud room and who has a huge interest in their passion to self-diagnose as well. And next, I'll take a BuzzFeed quiz on how my dessert choices will predict my future husband. And when I get Sebastian Stan, well, I'll have to self-diagnose myself as single to make room for my Bucky Barnes beauty. Sorry, Ablaze. Because I like Pokemon, I said why stop when we can catch 'em all. So I took the overgeneralized OCD and bipolar tests, had to really weed through my cluttered inventory to figure out what answer to pick because one Pokeball does not fit all when things are situational, and it was my lucky day, because not only did I get my precious autism, but I collected obsessive compulsive disorder and a shiny bipolar too. Now I'm armed and ready to fight the Elite Four, or whoever lets people freely post misinformation on TikTok. But of course, every true gamer knows the ultimate goal of Pokemon is to get that legendary. So I obviously have to go for it today with a DID quiz. You discover that you've done things that you do not remember doing. Well, sometimes Doug does go to bed later than me, and he'll tell me I said something really weird in my sleep and I have no recollection of it. This happens like at least twice a week, so I have to say sometimes, right? It's not clear whether you have completed an action, for example making a call, or whether you just thought about completing the action. Yeah, when your life is lived via lists and intention to get things done but also a complete lack of executive dysfunction, you get mixed up. This happens all the time. You recall a past event with an intensity that makes you feel like it's actually happening again. Well, I'm someone who thinks about dumb things I said and cringes all the time. And I'm very appreciative, so if I remember something someone did for me, I get just as emotional as I did then. So I guess that's another for all the time. Being approached by a stranger who tells you that you've met before but they call you by a different name. I mean, this happens to the best of us. You have some dude bothering you at the bar, he won't leave you alone, you give him a fake name. It's one of those things. Or when someone you initially meet misheard your name and you don't have the heart to correct them. This is like a sometimes thing. Being somewhere and not being sure how you got there. Yeah, I'm kinda guilty of going on autopilot in the car. I get a bit flustered from time to time. Bit confused as to how I managed to not hit 7 pedestrians and 4 cars on my drive when I barely remember pulling out of the driveway. Like, often. You struggle to work out whether a memory actually happened or you just made it up. Well, when 80% of your dreams are mundane things, sometimes things get a bit confusing. Like, did my brother lose his graphics card or was I asleep? Did Ridley actually speak to me or was I just dreaming? This happens, sometimes. People or things seem far away to you or unclear like you're seeing them through mist. Well, of course, with ADHD, I have so many thoughts and sometimes I get mentally overwhelmed, so I dissociate quite heavily. So yeah, often. I answer a lot of questions about having different reactions and talking to yourself. I do internal family systems therapy, where we personify my intrusive thoughts to make it easier to differentiate what is my own thinking and to let me talk the reason for the thought out like having a conversation. Obviously, this means the answers are going to be all the time, and I'm sure if anyone saw me, they would think I was making fake DID TikToks, but it works for me. And bada bing, bada boom, I have DID. Easy. I even passed with a funny number, so I probably have even more valid DID than someone professionally diagnosed. I've got that full Pokedex of illness and validation and generic resources to share with my fellow 10-year-olds allowed to wander off into the world unsupervised. Yeah, looking back, it's no wonder we aren't seeing how problematic this stuff is. I'm not saying these quizzes aren't useful. Having a guideline on where to begin your mental health journey is really great because it gives professionals a place to begin as well. If you're unable to receive professional help, having this idea of what might be wrong is awesome to be able to find relevant online resources to try and help yourself. And if those don't work, then at least you can look for another approach and see what sticks. Do what you gotta do to find the coping skills that will help you live your best life. The issue is not considering the complexities of mental illness and the sheer amount of overlap these disorders can have. To claim you have something and to begin speaking on behalf of the community of those diagnosed dilutes the facts from those who can 100% speak on living with a certain disorder. While you may think you have OCD, you might actually have obsessive thoughts due to social anxiety or inattentive ADHD. So everything you say may be completely true and valid in your head and your experiences are true, but it's an experience of someone living with something else. Until you're sure, it's really important not to try and speak as though things are fact, because it can derail how society views certain disorders and confuse others trying to understand how they're feeling. If we want to destigmatize mental illness, we need to make sure that it's the right info going onto social platforms, because that's where a lot of people are sadly getting their information from. To convince people that procrastinating means they have ADHD means that those on the outside will begin to think ADHD is some sort of excuse for being lazy. To convince people that obsessive cleaning is what OCD is means that those who suffer through different compulsive behaviors aren't believed, feel invalidated, and are dismissed in favor of a perfectionist who likes organizing things who calls that OCD. We've come so far in our world to see that those who suffer are real people. So we need to make sure that these voices aren't shut down and the doubtful people don't have any reason to think we're making excuses or lying. By all means, take those quizzes. Try to figure out what's going on in your head so you can help yourself. But bear in mind that unless you're sure, it's best to use it for your own self-improvement rather than to try and help others. Even if your intention is good, you may be harming a community of people struggling to be seen just like you. And I'm sure if you were in their position, you would want the same level of respect as well. And remember, mental illness is not a unique and quirky identity trait. You don't need to have a label of one to be cool and unique, because those come from your hobbies, interests, and other things you choose to do. Getting a professional diagnosis isn't some status symbol. It's a way for people to help themselves by knowing what's wrong so they can treat and manage. And until this message becomes the norm, I would stay far, far away from any social media trends and challenges encouraging people to self-diagnose. If you enjoyed today's video, please let me know. YouTube loves when a video is liked, gets comments, and has a lot of engagement, so if you want others to see this, that really helps. I also set up a new feature from YouTube called Super Thanks, where you can hit the thanks button under my video, send a little donation, and your comment will be colorful and easily visible so I can find you easier. It's just a little way for you guys to support the channel in a unique way, and to be able to tell others your story so they can find connection and support within our community too. Totally optional, you can still help push my videos out by liking, subscribing, and commenting as usual, but this is just something else to try. I'm hoping to mix up content so it doesn't get stale in one note, so let me know if there's any other mental health topics, TikTok trends, or other types of videos that you think I should cover. And that's all from me. Hope you all have an amazing day, and I shall see you all in the next video. Peace out, Girl Scouts. Thanks for watching.